Hey there everyone, Luke here, and all I can say is after reading this chapter, discussing it with people, Jams and Armbor, and looking on Twitter, we have quite the doozy of a chapter this week. So without further ado, let's just dive right into it. Alright, so this will be chapter 215 titled Long Road, and yeah, based on the confusing timeline in this chapter, that is an appropriate title for the chapter. But anyway, the chapter starts off with a flashback, just a brief flashback of Senku and Taiju just chilling out, doing some stargazing together. Again, just hammering in that despite what we all think, Taiju is still the best friend to Senku, even though it should probably be more like Chrome at this point, being the best friend to Senku. But anyway, they say with stargazing and with a telescope, it can get things can get in the way, and which alludes to the Earth's atmosphere and bad weather as well. So that's why they're launching a satellite straight into space so that they can spot the Y-Man hanging out on the moon. Makes sense, and got really no complaints about that. No, my complaints come later in the chapter. Not really complaints, just more like little nitpicks. They continue on by saying the thing that lets us peek at the moon firsthand is a man-made satellite, as we get an image of what potentially the satellite could actually look like, and it is beautiful, stunning image of just the sun, the earth, and the sun directly behind the moon with the satellite and the earth. And of course, this being Dr. Stone, we can't go a chapter without some people from the Kingdom of Science, mostly Kaku and Suika, going satellite in like a confusing manner before we have Karsuki going launch like one of our airplanes. Okay guys, you only had one plane in South America. You only managed to salvage one plane and build that up, so you can't really call it one of your airplanes. Which makes the question: why didn't we get more airplanes or more aircraft? This would have made things a whole lot easier. Before we get Chrome saying, so until we find Y-Man, it's going to keep flying around up there. Won't it run out of fuel? Which yeah, considering that Chrome has very little understanding of how satellites work, or no idea of how satellites work, that would make the most sense to bring a question like that up before Senku answers him. Although he might be playing this as a way to like kind of get information out of Senku without actually telling him what his idea is for the return vessel for Senku, Ryusui and Tsukasa, if they're the ones that are actually going to go to the moon. Anyway, Senku answers the question by saying that, strictly speaking, a satellite doesn't really fly. Instead, it continuously is falling towards Earth. As we get them playing around with the globe that was made by Kazuki and Yuzuriya, by saying, "Crude, we're falling back to Earth." What? Yeah, because we're falling from the opposite sky, and we see Suika and Chrome saying, always falling, spinning around and around. So does that mean, before Chelsea interrupts and says, a satellite doesn't need fuel, freaky. She's doing it like, a satellite doesn't need fuel, freaky. But I just love the fact that they're just accepting more of Suika as being like more involved and active in the science team. Now, makes sense because she's in on Chrome's plan to actually build the return vessel, so it kind of makes sense that they're both there together, kind of sort of like getting information from Senku whilst also not really telling him what is actually going on. They continue on by saying, more or less, though, it still needs an energy source, and Ukyo elaborates on this by saying, because beaming moon photos data back to Earth and calculating and adjusting its position both require electricity. As we get Suika again going on about electricity, before she questions why not just plug in some batteries, before Chrome reiterates her and say, yeah, but batteries would just run out of juice, which brings us to our source of energy in space. That's best. Which this is Senku saying this, which brings us to our source of energy in space that's basically never run out. Look for us, good old Mr. Sun is hanging out up there while emanating almost infinite amount of energy. And this is where again gets the idea of like, oh, I get it, you're going to be making solar panels Senku, or solar sands as he calls it. And of course we get once again, Kohaku and Suika going, energy from Mr. Sun, and I just love that because Kohaku, no disrespect to Kohaku, but she is not really the sharpest tool in the shed when it comes to the scientific duo. Like, for example, way back in the beginning stages of the series when they get getting the glass and everything together, and Senku and Chrome were going off about rocks, she was like, oh, there they go again, going off about rocks. I have nothing more to add to this conversation. I'm just going to go and train Kimru and Gimru. Yeah, so she's not the sharpest tool instead when it comes to the scientific noir, but that's what we love about her. Like, she can give the most crazy of expressions like, energy from Mr. Sun, like just looking as confused as she possibly could. But yeah, going back to when Suika was bringing up electricity, I just want there to be a point at the epilogue when she's actually teaching the kids of Chrome and Ruri how electricity actually works, and they're like, "Oh, please, Auntie Suika, can you tell us more about this electricity stuff?" I just want a little moment like that from her. But anyway, moving on. They say that yes, they're going to be building solar panels, and they go, Kohaku and crew dug up those sweet ingredients from Kokoshimi. Cellulium comes in handy once again, which is something Pyjams was really happy for, that they actually kind of brought these two chapters together, kind of back to back, and they kind of like sync up together, possibly making for episode, I don't know, 10, 12 in season 5. Who knows? That's way further off. And Senku goes on to say, combining a bunch of thin sheets and you can turn light into electricity. It'll be super primitive. And I love the fact that Senku is quite self-aware in this panel, as we get a roadmap of what it takes to actually build the solar panels, because he says it'll be a super primitive type with crap efficiency, but if you make it big enough, it'll get the job done. So it's kind of like saying, like, yes, compared to what we had in the 21st century, this is going to be crap, so we have to make it as massive as possible in order for this to actually function. Kind of in the same way they had to build like a giant machine just for it to function as a computer would do in the stone world. As we get the roadmap for the solar panels, which it includes sulfane, fluorite, seaweed, magnesium fluoride, anti-refractory coating, glass, gold, celluloid and copper just all smashing together creates the solar panel, and boom, within the next panel it's complete and it's powering the drone. And this is where we get Chrome going, amazing, the sun power. Oh wait, what about rainy and cloudy days? Before Senku and Ukyo correct him by saying there's no nasty weather up in space. Yeah, I know Pyjams kind of corrects me on this, but what about meteor showers? I know there's not going to be meteor showers like as close to the Earth as possible, but hey, solar weather phenomenon up there technically. But anyway, they say the satellites will be far above the clouds, and Suika and Chrome once again acting as like the brain box drew of the Shigami fish. People kind of like, again, sort of like seeming to get information out of Senku without actually telling him what's going on. They state that. So big panels like that are going to float around high up in the sky where Mr. Sun's always shining. The satellite has a battery that never dies. Bad! Oh my god, Chrome, I just love you. Okay, now this is where things get confusing. We cut over to Treasure Island as we see that the launch pad is already completed before we actually get Senku and his team returning to Treasure Island with an unmanned rocket acquired. Now, I want to know how long it actually took them to actually build this damn thing, because this makes me worried that they're actually going to skip over the rocket building, like the actual manned rocket building. This actually has me incredibly worried. Now, we still have a few things to get through before we get there, like building the spacesuits and doing the space training. But again, it seems like based on what's happening in this chapter, they are going to be skipping over the rocket building itself, and I don't know how I feel about that. Now, fortunately, this was not. I thought for a second reading this chapter at first, I thought this was the actual manned rocket that was going to be going up into space, especially when it had Senku 1 on there. But no, it's not. It's a test rocket, which, well, I'm glad this is actually being addressed. Like, they're going to have to be doing test after test after test on this thing. At the same time, I'm kind of worried that they're actually going to skip over the actual building of the spaceship. Wait a minute. Actually, now that I think about it, they said, hold on a minute, let me find the panel. Okay, I did find the panel. It's in chapter 210, and it's this it's this panel right here where they say, "Yep, our manned raid rocket is going to be built in Japan," and you obviously see that I think I let me go back to the chapter. Sorry about this, guys. Oh no, it's Senku one. Okay, ignore all of that, but still, they'll have to, now that they're going to Treasure Island, they're going to have to go back to Ishigami Village to actually build that rocket still. God, that was a bit of a brain fart there, but still, yeah, they're going to have to go back to Ishigami Village at some point. But anyway, as they approach Treasure Island and meeting out with Soyuz and Amaryllis, we see another ship in the distance, and we see Xenu with his level 99 rocket engine acquired. So he's built the rocket engine over this time. Great for him, but I would have liked to have seen some chapters in Brazil with him actually building the rocket. And yeah, for some reason he has a random person there where you'd think they would have brought Tsukasa in there, because that was the whole reason Tsukasa was left behind in South America, to actually keep an eye on Xenu, and now he's just brought him to Japan without him there. Like, what the hell, Tsukasa? You had one job. You had one job to do. One job to do. Oh my. Oh my word. But anyway, we get a cool panel of Senku and Xenu just kind of like meeting eye to eye, saying like, well done, well done. And Xenu says, I must say, Senku, that is one elegant craft. Before we get the biggest, like, when everyone's like just taken aback by this, where we see that you finished the engine in 3 short years. Now I had to go back and check on the timeline, and yes, it seems to have been 3 years. The Dr. Stone trivia puts the years like 57, 50, 53, which makes the most sense, because in April of 57-50, that's when they started working on the rocket engine in South America itself. So yeah, that makes the most sense. But that's not even the biggest surprise that comes in this chapter. Senku says that it's good to know your skills are still snap after napping for thousands of years, and this is where we get Miami just getting back into the swings of her reporting job, where they go, moments from now, here on Treasure Island, the new world's first ever rocket will launch a satellite into space. You do realise this broadcast won't... oh wait, this is Gen saying this. You do realise this broadcast won't reach further than the mainland Japan. And they're just like, oh, just let me have my say, Gen. This is my dream. I'm not going to let you take this away from me. Just let me do my job, okay? This is the biggest job I've ever had to do, so let me do it without you bloody interrupting. But anyway, Ryusuke says, it's all thanks to NASA's Dr. Xenu, the world's permanent rocket scientist, and Senku, the only high schooler to launch a homemade rocket into space. And we see the rocket starting to blast off and everything, as everyone's saying, haha, for the world's ultimate master pupil dream, getting an all-man rocket up into space is going to be a walk in the park. Before we see it crashing, it's like lifting off and then it just crashes down into the ocean. Yeah, it really wasn't going to be that easy. Which I'm glad, like I said in this chapter, I'm glad there's just going to be test after test after test of just getting this rocket up to tip-top condition, as we see them lifting out of the ocean, and saying like the thermal insulator was corroded by gas which poked a hole in the nozzle, and everything looked solid on paper. But I guess our stoneware creations are always going to be kind of showy. Yeah, you think now. This is the biggest surprise here. We see a panel of Kosaki repairing something, as we see a panel of calendars, and the biggest surprise here is that according to the Dr. Stone trivia page, these calendars, like when you have the 3rd of March and the 9th, no, the 3rd of February and the 9th of March as two Sundays. Yes, I'm pretty sure it was 2 Sundays, as 2 consecutive Sundays. They come every 28 years, and it appears that this chapter goes up to the year 5760. I want you to make that sink in. Senku was 20 years old when Suika revived him. Senku was 20 years old after Suika revived him and everything. So, yeah. if this is the case, Senku is over 30 years old at this point. He is over, well, he's 30 years old at this point. But yeah, I have to take umbrage with this panel of like being in 57, 60. I'm sure Inagaki will come out and say this. I'm sure Inagaki will come out and correct this and sort of like bring it back a bit, because I'm going off on a tangent here, because this is just like a what for everyone. Discords, Reddits, me and Pygems and Arbor, like just Twitter and everything, like just a big like what the hell kind of moment here. 57, 60, 30 years old, and nobody is married. Like Taiju Yuzuriya didn't get married in the intervening time and have kids. Chrome and Ruri didn't get married in the intervening time and have kids. Senku and Kaga, well, no, them two wouldn't get married anyway, because Senku's not really interested in that thing. But still, like 57, 60. Okay, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that nobody looks like they've aged and everything. Unless I guess the Medusa just stops them aging. That's part of the immortality. But at the same time, this also means like questions now. What about Shuffle? Like people remember Shuffle. Oh, you don't remember Shuffle? Let me get the panel. Yep. Oh. Yep, right there. Her right there. The Booktooth girl with the ponytail sticking up. How old is she gonna be? Like, if they cut back to Ishigami and she is still the same age, she still looks exactly the same as how she was when she was first introduced, I'm going to call BS on that. The same thing with Mariah, Sukasa's sister. She has to be a bit older now. She has to be a bit older if this takes place, like, literally 7 years after the panel where Senku went, wow, it took you 3 years. It took you 3 years to build this rocket engine, Sinu. Like, I think we could have been happy. I think we could have been all right with it just being at that point. But no, they had to throw this curveball into the mix. So take your pick of that. And also, it's going to be pretty sad, because this means that Chalk and Sagare, the pig and the dog, are on the cusp of dying at this point, along with Kosuke. Kosuke doesn't seem to have much longer for this world, given the fact that he's like 67, like he's in his like 70s now, like probably in his 80s now, like just like what, and most of the villagers, like most of the elderly villagers, are probably on their last legs as well. Like, seriously, Boichi, Inagaki, you need to address this. Okay, I'm calm after my old ranting thing. It was just a little nitpick of that, like just like a little bit of confusion, and I hope we get some confirmation from Inagaki and Boichi at some point. But anyway, the eternally young cast of Dr. Stone, I guess they are the eternally young cast of Dr. Stone. They continue to observe as another rocket that they tried to set off just explodes even before being able to set off, as Senku and Sinu discuss of the fact that it's probably just some faulty wire, and this is all especially complicated. Even rocket R&D in the 21st century saw these sorts of incidents, and again, it's like that's all it took. What a shame. Before Sai reiterates that it's just like how in coding, forgetting a single hyphen in the line can cause your whole program to fail. Yeah, just like with anything, like one slip up and the whole thing comes crashing down in anything, not just in coding and science, just in anything in life in general. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like, what's the Y-Man been doing for the past 10 years? Just been observing them building this rocket and not making an attack? Like, if this, or the last 7 years, if this takes place really in 57, 60 in this chapter, what's the Y-Man been doing all this time? Anyway, they continue on, and as they make adjustments to the rocket, it fails again before they say an air bubble in the vaporized fuel. This time, it's busted its inner wings before we see another rocket being tested and failing, and then they rearray it, and then another rocket tested and failing before we get another test and fail, before finally we get like a rocket actually taking off sort of like in a distance. But of course, this being Dr. Stone and Senku having the worst look in the world, this rocket also explodes in just like a big geyser of an explosion. I cannot wait to see just, because it's a double page spread of just this like explosion. I cannot wait to see that in the anime. Like, that is just going to be so amazing to see. Before we cut to the end of the chapter where we see Yo just panting for breath and going, God, that's got to break his spirit. How many years has it been of going back to square one over and over again? Probably about 7 years, give or take this chapter. Before he says those two are unreal, we're referring to Senku and Sinu. How the heck do they do that? But there's one panel in particular that caught my interest with Yo, and we're going to get to it in a second. Before we see not only Senku and Sinu still working diligently to get this rocket built and shot up into space, but we also see Chrome and Suika observing, getting more information on how to on rockets and scientific calculations for rockets to actually build a return vessel, and that's where the chapter ends. So pretty big chapter at this point. We've got Sinu back, we've got the rocket actually being tested and failing to actually send the satellite into space. We still need to build that damn rocket, man-made rocket, which, fingers crossed, I'm hoping that they don't skip on. Now, I'm worried because of this chapter, but fingers crossed, please don't do that. Now, the thing that caught my interest was Yo's panel right here, where it looks like he's crying. Now, this kind of got me thinking, I know some people might disagree with me on this one, that Yo might be the traitor. That panel and just the wording he was saying of like, how did they keep going? How did they keep going after so many failures? That's probably, and he's crying about that. That's probably him thinking like, why am I betraying them? Why am I doing this, betraying them? Now, maybe that's kind of a stretch, but Yo's been proven to like betray people in the past in the series, so it's not out of the realms of possibility. And he was a corrupt cop here back in the day, so it is possible that he's doing that. Maybe he discovered something about the Y-Man, or maybe he's kind of in the same vein as Uki, or maybe they're both the traitor. That's a possibility. They're both the traitor, and it's just been kind of making us think that there's one traitor, but there could be two traitors. But anyway, yeah, that's my only thing that I had on Yo, that kind of panel, like of him just crying, just sort of like seemed to come completely out of nowhere for his character, although he could just be crying of just admiration for Sinu and Senku. But yeah, that's really all I have on it. That's really all I have to go on, because of just how like, what the hell with the timeline in this chapter. But yeah, that's all I have to say on this chapter. So anyway, guys, what did you think of this chapter? Like, subscribe, comment, all that jazz. And this will be Lasherluke signing off. Later, guys.